My name is Emma, and I was born in a village where the fields stretched endlessly. Where life was slow but also suffocating for a girl who dared to dream. I still remember the narrow mud streets. The sound of the hand pump in the morning, and my mother's soft hands braiding my hair before sending me to the small village school. My father was a farmer, a simple man, proud of his land, but cautious about letting his daughter fly too far. In my village, girls were not encouraged to study beyond a certain age. By the time I turned 15, whispers began, "It's time to think about her marriage. Don't fill her head with books." But I was stubborn. Every time I opened a book, I felt as though the world outside the village was calling me. I wanted more than to just be someone's wife and daughter-in-law. I wanted to see the city, learn, and make something of myself. My mother used to secretly encourage me. Late at night, while the lantern burned low, she would say, "Emma, study as much as you can. Education is something no one can take away from you." Her words became the fuel of my courage. When I finally convinced my parents to let me go to the city for further studies, it was not easy. My uncles mocked my father, "Why waste money on a girl? Tomorrow she will belong to another family." But my father, though hesitant, allowed me. Perhaps he saw the fire in my eyes, or perhaps he was simply tired of my endless pleas. Either way, one bright morning, with a small bag of clothes and a heart full of hope, I boarded the bus to the city. The city dazzled me. The noise, the lights, the rush of people, it was overwhelming, but it was also freedom. I rented a small room near my college, and though money was tight, I cherished every moment of my independence. That was where my story truly began, because it was in the city that I met David. I first met David on a rainy afternoon. The college library was almost empty, and I was struggling with a thick English novel, trying to understand each word with my small pocket dictionary. A tall boy with sharp features and confident eyes leaned over and said, "You're holding that book upside down." I looked at him, shocked, and then realized he was joking. He smiled, and in that smile there was something disarming. That was David, always bold, always making his presence felt. He was not from my village world. He was city-bred, confident, and spoke English with ease. I should have been intimidated, but instead I felt drawn to him. He started helping me with my studies, and slowly, those study sessions turned into long conversations. We talked about dreams, about freedom, about how life should be lived without fear. For the first time in my life, I felt someone truly saw me. When David confessed his feelings, I hesitated. A girl from a small village and a boy like him, it felt impossible. But he laughed at my fears. "Emma, love doesn't care where you come from. It only cares about where we go together." I believed him. Perhaps I wanted to believe him. Our love story was not easy. My family resisted. He is from another culture, another world. His family wasn't happy either. But David fought for me, and I fought for him. Finally, against all odds, we married. Those first years of marriage were golden. We built a small but warm home. Soon, our 2 children came into our lives, a boy and a girl, and I thought my world was complete. I cooked for him, cared for him, and built my life around his dreams. I never realized how quietly, how dangerously, things would begin to change. At first, the change in David was slow, like a shadow creeping at dusk. He became distant, coming home late, ignoring the children's laughter. I thought it was work stress. I cooked his favorite meals, tried to cheer him, but his eyes no longer softened when they looked at me. Then came the silences. Long, heavy silences that said more than words ever could. I tried to ignore the signs, the perfume on his shirt that wasn't mine, the strange calls he took in another room, the way he no longer held my hand when we walked together. My heart screamed the truth, but my mind begged me not to believe it. One night, when I finally gathered courage to ask, he exploded. Stop acting like a village girl who knows nothing. I am tired of your questions, Emma. That night, for the first time, he slapped me. The sting on my cheek was nothing compared to the crack in my soul. After that, everything collapsed quickly. He stopped hiding his betrayal. He mocked me, told me I was unworthy, that he regretted marrying me. His words pierced deeper than knives, and then, the unforgivable happened. It was raining heavily that night. The children were asleep, and I was standing near the window, praying silently that God would save my family. David came in, drunk, with cold fury in his eyes. He shouted, cursed, and finally said the words that shattered my world, "Get out of my house. Emma. This is not your place anymore." I begged, I pleaded, I held his hands and cried, "Don't do this, at least think of the children." But he pulled my hands away as if I were nothing. He dragged me toward the door, his grip merciless. My children woke up, crying. I reached out to them, my heart breaking, but he pushed me outside into the storm. The door slammed shut. My children's cries echoed behind it, fading as the rain swallowed me whole. That night, drenched and shivering, I realized I had lost everything: my home, my husband, my children. I was just a woman alone in a ruthless city, and yet, somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and humiliation, a spark lit up. A voice whispered, "This is not the end, Emma. This is the beginning of your fight." The morning after that terrible night, I had nothing: no home, no children, no money. My clothes were soaked, my heart was broken, and my dignity was in pieces. I wandered the streets like a shadow, wondering if life was even worth living, but I kept walking. I couldn't give up. Not yet. I found a cheap shelter where broken women slept on torn mats, their eyes empty. I realized I was now one of them, a discarded woman. But I also realized something else: I could either stay broken, or I could rise. The next day, I searched for work. No one wanted to hire a woman without references, without polished English, without status. Doors closed in my face again and again. Finally, a hotel manager looked at me, my worn clothes, my desperate eyes, and said, "Fine. You can clean rooms. Don't expect much pay." That hotel became my battlefield. I scrubbed floors, changed sheets, washed dishes. My hands bled, my back ached, but every coin I earned carried a promise: one day I will get my children back. At night, after long shifts, I studied. I borrowed books, sat under dim lights, and taught myself the basics of law. People laughed at me: a maid studying law? What a joke. But I ignored them. I was no longer just Emma the village girl. I was Emma the mother who refused to surrender. It was during those days that fate brought me back to Zunera, my childhood friend from the village. She saw me in the hotel lobby, carrying a bucket, and at first she didn't recognize me. But when she did, her eyes filled with tears. "Emma? What happened to you?" I couldn't stop myself. I broke down in her arms. She became my anchor. She encouraged me, helped me with books, sometimes paid my exam fees when I had nothing. With her beside me, I didn't feel so alone anymore. Years passed. Slowly, I transformed. From a broken woman cleaning hotel floors, I became a woman who could read legal documents, who understood her rights, who could stand tall without trembling. The day I walked into the lawyer's office, my hands did not shake. I said clearly, "I want to fight for the custody of my children. I want justice." That was the moment my war truly began. Walking into the courtroom for the first time was terrifying. The tall walls, the heavy silence, the sharp eyes of lawyers, it all felt like another world. And standing there across from me was David. He looked at me with the same arrogance I remembered, the man who had once promised me forever, now my enemy. His lawyer smirked as if the case was already won. After all, who was I? A village-born woman, a hotel maid, daring to challenge him? But I stood straight. My voice did not tremble when I said, "I am here for my children. I will not back down." The hearings began. David's lawyer attacked me mercilessly. "She has no income, no proper home. She cannot raise children. She is uneducated, incapable, and has lived in a shelter. Is this the future you want for 2 children?" Each word was meant to crush me. But I had prepared myself. I presented every payslip from the hotel, every certificate from the night classes I attended, every proof that I had worked honestly to rebuild my life, and when they questioned my character, I looked the judge in the eye and said, "I am not here to defend myself as a wife. I am here to defend myself as a mother. My children need love, not wealth. They need safety, not luxury. They need me." In those moments, I felt a fire rise within me. Every humiliation, every tear, every sleepless night, suddenly, they became my strength. I still remember the day of the final judgment. The courtroom was packed. David sat with his chin high, confident of his victory. My heart pounded so loud I thought everyone could hear it. The judge read the decision slowly. "Custody of the children is hereby granted to their mother, Emma." The world froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then it hit me, I had won. David's face turned pale, his arrogance crumbling in front of everyone. My lawyer squeezed my hand, but all I could think about was running to my children. When they finally came into my arms, after years of separation, I held them so tightly they could hardly breathe. My son whispered, "Mama, are we going home?" Tears streamed down my face as I kissed their foreheads. "Yes, my loves. We are going home. This time, no one will take you away from me." That day, I was reborn. I was no longer just a survivor. I was a mother who had conquered the impossible. After winning my children back, I could have stopped. I could have lived quietly, raising them and forgetting the world. But life had taught me something deeper. No woman suffers alone. My story was not unique, it was just one among thousands. That's why I decided to open a small center for women like me. It wasn't fancy at first, just a rented room with cracked walls, 2 chairs, and a banner that said, "Women's Support Circle." But for me, it was sacred ground. The very first woman who walked through my door was Sarah. She was young, barely in her 20s, but her eyes looked decades older. She held her scarf tightly around her bruised arms, as if trying to hide the evidence of her husband's cruelty. I heard, "You help women," she whispered. I invited her in, gave her tea, and let her speak. At first, her words tumbled out in fragments, fearful, broken. Slowly, the whole story spilled out. Sarah had been married at 18 to a man 10 years older. From the first month, he treated her not as a wife but as a punching bag. He beat her for cooking late, for speaking too softly, for looking at him the wrong way. And when she tried to seek help from her in-laws, they said, "A woman must endure. This is marriage." Her family told her the same. She had nowhere to go. By the time she came to me, she was trembling, her spirit nearly gone. I held her hand and said the words I wished someone had once said to me, "Sarah, you are not alone. And you are not weak. What was done to you is not your fault. You deserve better, and we will fight for it." For weeks, Sarah came to the center every day. She attended counseling sessions, learned basic computer skills, and slowly began to smile again. I saw the life returning to her eyes, and then came the day of her courage. She filed a case against her abusive husband, with my center standing beside her. In court, her husband tried to intimidate her, shouting, calling her names. But Sarah stood firm, her voice steady. When the judgment came, He was ordered to provide her financial support and was warned by the court never to harm her again. Sarah walked out of that courtroom taller than I had ever seen her. Later, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Emma, you didn't just save me. You gave me back to myself." That day, I realized my center was more than just a room with chairs. It was a place where women could be reborn, and Sarah was only the beginning. Sarah's victory gave me courage. Word began to spread, slowly, quietly, that there was a place in the city where women could come without shame, where someone would listen. One winter morning, a girl named Nadia walked in. She was so thin her wrists looked fragile, her face pale as if every drop of joy had been drained from her. She sat down across from me, her eyes swollen from crying. "I was married only 6 months ago," she began. "But my marriage ended before it even began." Her husband's family had demanded more dowry after the wedding, furniture, money, even a car. Nadia's parents had already stretched beyond their means to give what little they could, selling land and taking loans. But greed knows no end. When her family couldn't meet the new demands, her in-laws turned vicious. They taunted her daily, "You brought nothing into this house. You are a burden, not a bride." Her husband, who had once sworn to protect her, joined their cruelty. One night, they threw her out, still wearing her bridal bangles, which now felt like chains. As she told her story, Nadia clutched those same bangles, her hands trembling. "Emma, they broke me before I could even live. What am I now? Not a wife, not a daughter. Just a shame to my parents." I reached across the table and held her hands. "No, Nadia. You are not shame. You are strength. And they will answer for what they did to you." With the help of my center, Nadia filed a dowry harassment case. It was long, exhausting, and filled with threats from her in-laws. But she never stood alone. We stood with her. In court, her husband's lawyer tried to paint her as greedy, but Nadia's quiet dignity destroyed every lie. She showed evidence of the money her parents had given, the loans taken, the humiliation endured. The verdict came months later. Her in-laws were fined heavily. Her husband was ordered to return the jewelry and money. And the judge condemned the family's cruelty in open court. Nadia cried when the judgment was read. But for the first time, they were tears of release. Later, she began working at the center itself, helping new girls who came in, guiding them through their first days of fear. She told them, "I was once where you are. If I can stand again, so can you." Nadia transformed her pain into power. She was no longer the broken bride. She became a warrior against the chains of dowry, and watching her, I felt my center grow stronger, not because of me, but because of the women who carried it forward with their courage. By the time Miriam came to my center, I thought I had heard every kind of cruelty a woman could endure. But her story shook even me. She walked in quietly, dressed in plain clothes, her face veiled. When she finally lifted it, I saw a woman who looked both young and old at the same time, youth in her skin, but centuries of pain in her eyes. "I was promised a new life," she began, her voice breaking. Miriam had been married into a wealthy family with the promise that her husband would take her abroad. Her parents had been overjoyed, thinking their daughter would live in comfort, that her life would be better than theirs. But soon after the wedding, the truth came out. Her husband had never intended to give her a home abroad. He had used her only to get money from her family. Once he had drained everything they could offer, he abandoned her, leaving her stranded in a foreign country, without papers, without help, without dignity. She spent months working illegally as a cleaner just to survive, terrified of being caught, until finally she returned home. But when she did, the worst awaited her: whispers in her neighborhood, taunts from relatives, and rejection from her own family. "They say I am cursed," Miriam said, tears running down her face. My parents won't even let me stay in their house. To them, I am ruined. I felt my heart ache for her, because I knew that kind of rejection too. I told her, Miriam, they lied to you, not the other way around. You are not ruined, you were betrayed. And we will make sure the truth is known. With the help of my center's lawyer, Miriam filed a fraud and abandonment case. Her husband thought she would stay silent out of shame. He never expected her to stand in a courtroom, voice steady, exposing every lie. The case dragged on, but Miriam grew stronger each day. In the end, her husband was forced to pay compensation and faced criminal charges for fraud, but the real victory was not the money or the judgment, it was Miriam herself. She decided to stay in the city, joined language classes, and eventually became a translator. One day she told me with a shy smile, Emma, they once said I had no voice. Now my voice is my profession. Her transformation reminded me of my own journey. Pain had carved her, but it had also made her unbreakable, and with Sarah, Nadia, and Miriam by my side, my center no longer felt like mine alone. It belonged to all of us, a sisterhood of survivors turned warriors. When I first brought my children back after the court's victory, they were shy, almost afraid to believe I was really there to stay. They had lived too long under the shadow of separation. My daughter clung to me in her sleep, as if she feared I would vanish again. My son, though braver, would often ask, Mama, you won't leave us again, right? I promised them every day, never. No one can take you away from me now. Raising them while building the center was not easy. Money was always short, and time was always running. There were days when I cooked only one meal to save money for electricity. Nights when I stayed awake preparing case files while my children slept beside me, but slowly, things began to change. My son grew curious about the law. He watched me prepare documents, listened when I discussed cases with other women. One evening he said, Mama, when I grow up, I want to be a lawyer, so no child will ever be taken from his mother again. My daughter, gentler in spirit, became the heart of our small community. She would sit with the children of women who came to the center, telling them stories, making them laugh. One day she told me, Mama, I think I want to be a teacher, for the kids who don't have anyone to teach them. Hearing them dream made me stronger. I realized that my fight was no longer just for myself, it was for a generation. Meanwhile, the center grew beyond my imagination. What had started as a small rented room became a network of women supporting each other. We began offering literacy classes, computer training, and legal workshops. Women who had once come and broken now returned to volunteer, guiding the new ones. I still remember the first time we organized a public seminar. I stood on a small stage, nervous, as dozens of women sat before me. My hands shook until I looked at my children in the front row. Their proud smiles calmed me. Sisters, I said into the microphone, we are told to suffer in silence, to hide our bruises, to accept injustice. But silence is not patience, it is a prison. Today we break that silence. Today we say, enough. The room erupted in applause, some women crying, others raising their hands in solidarity. It was the sound of chains breaking. The Women's Support Center had become more than a building, it was a movement, but every movement has shadows. And one shadow was waiting to return, that shadow was David. Years passed, and life rebuilt itself brick by brick. My children grew strong, the center flourished, and the voices of women filled my world with courage. I thought I had left David behind in the ashes of the past, but fate has its own ways. One day, as I was leaving the courthouse after attending a woman's hearing, I saw a familiar figure standing by the gates. For a moment, my heart stopped. It was David, but he was not the David I remembered. His once proud posture was bent, his sharp clothes replaced with worn fabric, his face aged and hollow. The man who had once thrown me into the streets with arrogance now looked like someone life itself had abandoned. He approached me slowly, his eyes downcast. "Emma," he said, his voice rough, almost broken. "I have nothing left. The business collapsed. Friends are gone. The woman I chose over you left me. I came to ask if I can see the children." For a moment, the old pain surged through me, the night of the storm, my children's cries, the door slammed in my face. My fists clenched. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to throw his own cruelty back at him, but then I looked at him again. And I realized something: he was already defeated. Life had given him the punishment I never could. I took a deep breath. "David," I said firmly, "you once told me I was worthless. You thought you could destroy me. Look at me now, I stand tall, stronger than you ever imagined. My children know the truth, and they will never forget who stood by them and who abandoned them." He lowered his head, unable to meet my eyes. "You may see the children," I continued, "because they deserve to know their father. But you will never again control our lives. That power is gone forever." My children met him later, cautiously, without the love they once had. They were polite, but distant. And I saw the realization in his eyes: he had lost not only his family, but the place in their hearts that could never be regained. That was the true revenge. Not screaming, not hatred, not punishment. The true revenge was my survival, my strength, my legacy. That night, I stood before the women of my center, my children beside me, and said, "Sisters, revenge is not destroying those who hurt us. Revenge is rising so high that their cruelty can no longer reach us. Look at us today, we are no one's victims. We are warriors. We are free." The hall thundered with applause. Women stood, clapping, some weeping openly. My daughter held my hand tightly. My son whispered, "Mama, you won." Yes. I had won. Not just against David, but against a world that had once tried to silence me, and as I looked around that room filled with strong women, I knew this was only the beginning. My story was not just mine anymore. It belonged to every woman who had ever been broken and had found the courage to rise again.